Demo 4 is finally released, and goodness gracious, this chapter is actually insane. I had no clue what was in store after chapter 3, but the build up to the final fight and the lore in this chapter is actually really crazy. Anyways, just like chapter 3, this demo comes with its own baggage on our hunt to collect the swords of time, specifically in this case, the firebrand, which I will be explaining the significance of the firebrand and its influence in continuing chapters. Do not worry. From making new friends to fighting new enemies and even summoning beings beyond mortal comprehension, chapter 4 is absolutely amazing, and I'm going to be talking about the lore of the ancients, Calypso and Trotter, and the dark power behind the firebrand. But before I do that, I'm gonna have to recap what goes on in chapter 4. Please play this chapter before watching further, because there will be spoilers ahead. To begin, after getting the Ghostwalker, Shedleski tells us to acquire the firebrand, which strangely has no guardian in the Temple of the Red Sun. He tells us to go to the docks to find a boat to the desert, and we quickly do so. Once we finally make it to the desert, we traverse the dunes until we find an ancient tomb which has strange drawings on the wall. What these drawings mean are a little confusing, but I do have a theory about what they represent, which I'll get into later. After avoiding all the traps in the tomb, we're met face to face with none other than the great Flosin Nosin Nihilipilification. Using his boundless wish-granting abilities, we ask for a ship and a bottle, which the great Flochi is reluctant at first to give, but through some convincing, he gives us the ship and a bottle, allowing us to finally leave the ancient tomb. Outside the tomb, we see a group of pirates planning a mutiny on their captain to steal the treasure from the Red Sun Temple for themselves. They catch us eavesdropping, and we make quick work of the mutineers and head into their camp and are greeted by Captain Trotter and his first mate Calypso. He lets us join his crew, seeing as how we only want the firebrand and his crew wants the remaining treasure. Within the temple, we're accompanied by Calypso, who can actually read the ancient hieroglyphics on the wall. She tells us how they talk about their kingdom, their religion, and their sacrifices. Heavy emphasis on the sacrifice aspect. Through exploring more, we come across the great Flochi, who gives us his shovel so he can finally be free of us, and so we can delve deeper into the temple. We then meet up with Trotter, who begins to have his doubts about the hunt for the treasure and notes a suspiciously blank wall, which actually turns out to be a trap set by the temple's guardian. After beating the guardian, we come to find out that Trotter's whole crew sadly didn't make it. We push on despite this and find the treasure along with the firebrand. Before we take it, however, we must fight a guilt-ridden Trotter who attacks us with the firebrand, as he now believes we're mutineers who are attempting to sacrifice him and his crew for the sword. After taking him down with Calypso, Trotter mentions voices coming from the sword, telling him that we had planned this from the beginning, before lunging at Calypso, who quickly catches his attack and kicks him into the lava. What arises is the ancients, who thank us for this beautiful sacrifice and how they will use him as a nexus of fate to usher in a new world of metamorphosis with their power. We defeat the ancient god with Calypso and reclaim the firebrand, ending chapter 4. Now with that lengthy recap out of the way, we can finally begin to talk about the lore of the ancients, their connection with the firebrand, and the metamorphosis that is hinted at in the end of the chapter. Let's begin with the history of the ancients. The ancients, as their name suggests, is a civilization of ancient Robloxians, or judging by the hieroglyphics, past humans. Our first sighting of such beings is in the ancient tomb. Around the entrance of the tomb, we can see an eye at the center and various ancients being depicted running away from the eye in the center. Further inside, we see that the civilization is actually peaceful. These ancients have established houses and various foods like fish, cattle, and fruit. Further into the tomb, however, we see that the ancients have also been in a war, seeing as how they had various bowmen, spearmen, and chariots. It was a fierce war, and many were severely wounded. Looking for a way to defeat their enemies, or perhaps recover from their loss, the ancients had prayed to the sky for their god, and were bestowed with the firebrand, and using the warmth and power from it, they began to rebuild their civilization. Another disaster had struck the ancients, however, which caused them to find another source to help them, this being the great Flochi. When Flochi awakens, he mentions how he hasn't seen a Robloxian like us in a millennia. He also notes that his name is given to him by his first summoner, which can mean that these ancients did indeed use his power, but what his first summoner wished for is unknown. He also says that his last summoner was much more hateful, which marks the start of the ancients' descent towards sacrifice and death, as the last summoner would make an evil and destructive wish in regards for the civilization. Regardless, whatever the last summoner wished for caused the ancient civilization to be destroyed, this time by fire, suggesting that this wish must have been related to the firebrand. Moving on from the tomb and into the temple, we see that the ancients continued worshipping their new god. Many ancients at this point began leaving, however, but this did not deter the believers. There was an established hierarchy, as the ancients had a king or pharaoh that was beloved by many. This pharaoh would observe events that happened in the civilization, particularly the sacrifices that many people would participate in. Under the surveillance and instruction of the pharaoh, the first thing the ancients sacrificed to their god were livestock. They would take multiple animals at a time and would sacrifice them in an attempt to appease the god and quench their thirst. This didn't work, however, which caused the ancients to begin sacrificing each other for the sake of their god. Only this time, instead of knives, they would use the firebrand to perform the human executions. This would cause the souls of the victims to be assimilated into the firebrand and for their body and blood to be used to provide heat to the people who consumed it. This messed up process would continue until every last ancient sealed their soul into the firebrand for the sake of their god. So in the end, it really was a win-win for both their god and the ancients in a really messed up and twisted way. This is the full history of the ancients from start to finish. But as we know, the ancient story does not end here, because they are the beings we fight for the firebrand at the end of the chapter. This means the ancients had actually found a way of resurrecting themselves and becoming their own god. I believe that with one more piece of hidden lore, I can explain how this came to be and why the ancients were so fixated on sacrifice. Now, the reason the ancients went through all this sacrifice and death is because of a prophecy that they followed. In one of the final areas before reaching the firebrand, the player will find a puzzle room. Within this room, you will find the prophecy that the ancients believed in. At a glance, this prophecy will read as follows. Under the gaze of the blank in the sky conspire. Heat of blank fall to us, safety which we desire. Quell this heat, blank does provide. First, under the gaze of the blank in the sky conspire. The only logical word that could go there is God. The ancients would always pray towards the sky because that's where they believed their god was. Next, heat of blank fall to us, safety which we desire. The blank here is blood. It would make sense since someone who was sacrificed using the firebrand would literally be set on fire, and I guess by proxy, their blood would be hot. And also, the safety that comes from the blood is in reference to the fact that the person being sacrificed will be of innocent blood. Finally, quell this heat, blank does provide. It's literally the firebrand. I don't think I have to explain this. It's a sword next to fire. It doesn't take a genius to get that. However, I was confused on why the ancients wanted to quell the fire from the firebrand. It took a little bit of thinking, but in reality, what I think they mean by fire here is actually the hatred that comes from the sword. We know that every sword contains some degree of hatred, seeing as how literally anyone who wields a sword of power hears voices and is more prone to feeling hatred. If my previous theory about hatred being in every sword of power is correct, then this means hatred as in both the entity and the emotion, which I guess is the same thing, is in the firebrand, which is kind of confirmed thanks to Trotter after we defeat him. So now, after fully deciphering the prophecy, we get this. Under the gaze of the god in the sky conspire, heat of blood fall to us, safety which we desire. Quell this heat, firebrand does provide. Or basically, while God's watching, kill this innocent kid and use their blood to get the sword. Now, what if I told you the craziest part about this is that the prophecy is not foretelling how to obtain the firebrand, but rather the prophecy is actually about how to resurrect the ancients to cause their metamorphosis. Just think about it. Trotter was able to wield the sword just fine. He didn't shed any innocent blood beforehand, and no, his crew doesn't count. They're pirates and they're poor. They are not innocent, and he wasn't even the one who killed them. This means that the ancients, who were people in the beginning, managed to somehow figure out that by assimilating their souls in the firebrand, they could then be reborn as the very god they prayed to, which is really weird, but I have a way of explaining this without sounding too crazy. These people were spiritual worshippers who prayed to their god every day and would do anything to appease them. During this time, their god did not have a physical form, but could still communicate with the ancients, either through the pharaoh or the firebrand. One day, their god wanted more and demanded livestock, which is why they started sacrificing animals in hope of appeasing their god. But as we know, the ancients are never quenched. Sometime after sacrificing their livestock, they must have figured out that it still wasn't enough to satisfy their god, and quickly learned about the firebrand's ability to seal souls inside of it. The prophecy of being reborn through the firebrand by shedding innocent blood was thus created from this newfound knowledge. This scenario was made to create the perfect sacrifice, since to them, the best sacrifice is one that shows metamorphosis. To first be innocent and trusting of the people you care the most about, and then unwillingly betrayed and killed by those same people while in your final moments feeling nothing but treachery, that is the perfect tragedy that the ancients wanted, and they used that soul to fully be reborn as their own god, who by using the power of the firebrand would proceed with their own metamorphosis. This metamorphosis would be them sealing the souls of the entire world into the firebrand for all eternity so that they may finally be satisfied. Okay, to make a long story short and to summarize this entire theory, the ancients are both the civilization of people that worship the god and also the god itself in like some sort of eldritch soul shenanigans. And the metamorphosis they talk about is basically them putting more souls in the firebrand, which technically they are the firebrand since they're the souls trapped inside of it. So in some roundabout way, we fight the manifestation of the firebrand in chapter 4, which technically means the firebrand is its own guardian. Anyways, if you have anything you'd like to add or take away from this, then please do so. Also, correct me if you think I got something wrong. Make sure to like and subscribe since I think I'm the only one with this theory. This has been Super Derplux. Thanks for listening to me yap, and peace.